Good afternoon and welcome to the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board September 4th, 2024 meeting. My name is Mark Wenzel. I'm the supervisor of the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board branch. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to ask Sang Sobel, one of the board's senior advisors, to talk about how to participate in today's meeting. Sang?
Thank you. Good afternoon. We welcome public comment during general public comment period on the agenda, and if desired after any agenda item. The public may participate and comment in person or remotely by Zoom or by phone. Please note that the public comment may be limited to 3 minutes per participant. For those of you who are present in the room, you may sign in on the seat at the entry. Participants will be called upon in turn. Participants can use the raise hand function in the Zoom video conference, and they will be called upon. Participants on the phone may dial #2 when they wish to speak to play with the queue by the operator. Please note that the Zoom chat is visible for participants and that we encourage participants to send all written questions and comments to our email address, wsab@energysafety.ca.gov. Written comments we receive will be posted on the docket portion of our website. Next slide, please. Relevant materials for today's meeting will be found on our website. The link can be found on the public agenda for today's meeting. Meeting materials are also available in the room. Additionally, public comments we see in writing can be found on our website at the docket for this meeting. The link for submitted comment can be found on our public agenda. Now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Unique to review the building emergency protocol for those of you meeting in person.
Thank you, Sang. For those of you joining us today at the physical meeting location, should an emergency evacuation be required, please proceed to the doors in the back of the room, where you'll find, through the hallway where you'll find the stairs on your left-hand side. Proceed down to the main floor and out of the building onto P Street. Then continue to our evacuation site, Franklin D. Roosevelt Park, located on 9th and P Streets. Also, the restrooms are located just outside the doors on the left-hand side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sang and Unique. Chair Block, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Jessica Block. I'm chair of the board and will now call this meeting to order. Today is September 4th, 2024. This is the meeting for the Q3 Wildfire Safety Advisory Board meeting. To begin, Mark, will you take the roll call?
Chair Block.
Here.
Chair Block here. Vice Chair Porter.
Here.
Vice Chair Porter here. Board Member Armstrong.
Here.
Board Member Armstrong here. Board Member Philman.
Here.
Board Member Philman here. Board Member Haynes.
Here. Here.
Haynes here. Board Member Seifert.
Here.
Board Member Seifert here. And Board Member Mader has let us know that he is running a little bit late. When he joins, we will let people know that he's here, but we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, fellow board members, for being here today. I'd like to thank the Office of Energy Infrastructure IT professional, Rain Vasquez, for supporting our meeting today. We're largely virtual. Our entire board is virtual. And then there's the in-person staff at the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety today. Thank you to our supervisor, Mark Wenzel, our senior advisor, Sang Sobel, and our analyst, Unique Coleman, for assisting with and organizing today's meeting. And I'd like to acknowledge Sean Richards, who's our new PURA 5, our new advisor, replacing Jonathan Frost. And he's just joined us as of, I believe, yesterday. Welcome, Sean. Let's review the meeting agenda. In a moment, we're going to begin with the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety Policy Division update, then the energy safety update on their responses to our Wildfire Safety Advisory Board recommendations. Next, we'll hear a presentation from Deputy Chief Sean Fairbanks from CAL FIRE. Then the board committees will provide updates on their activities, including strategic planning, implementation plan, and a report on the POU advisory opinion. Next, we'll review and consider adopting our bylaws. And then the board will review and consider adopting meeting minutes for our last meeting on June 5th. After that, we'll hear a staff update. We'll discuss agenda items for future meetings and general public comment for items that are not on the agenda, and then we'll adjourn. Thank you very much. In terms of opening statements, I just would like to say that it's been an interesting and somewhat, well, it's been an interesting fire season this year. Lots of activity, not as many large wildfires as we've seen in the past, but an indicative season for what we might expect in the next couple of years. Looking forward to the CAL FIRE update on the fire season and what we can expect in the next year. And I will hold any further comments of my own until we get to the board member comments. I'd like to ask fellow board members if they have any opening statements. And I'd like to start with board member Fellman, please.
Thank you, Chair Block. Today is my last board meeting. I let the board and staff know about this. I am resigning as of this meeting, and I want to share just a few thoughts, if I may. It's really been an honor and a privilege to serve with all of you from the very beginning. I know board member Haynes just joined, and it's been great working with you for the time you've been on the board as well. It's just about 5 years ago when I received the call from the governor's office to see if I was willing to join this board, and my answer was a resounding yes. I feel like the work that we've been doing has just been amazing. I've learned so much from each of you, and I do appreciate and want to thank you for your patience as we went through the startup efforts of this board, and having to pivot to having our last in-person meeting before COVID on March 11th, when we didn't know what was going on with the pandemic, and learning how to be online, just setting up the structures, the protocols, the committees. And in my time as vice chair, I know that was a lot for everyone to absorb, but thanks for doing it. And I just want to also say that I've watched how each of you has applied your individual and then collective expertise to advance the thinking around wildfire prevention, suppression, and mitigation on behalf of all Californians, and especially how the bridge has been built to the publicly owned utilities, which has been so important to engage them in this conversation, as well as the work that everyone's done, not just with the board, but with the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety on the development of the wildfire mitigation plans for the investor-owned utilities. So in closing, I hope that I'm invited to any board reunions. I will be paying attention to your future work. And I also want to thank each of you individually again. And I want to extend my appreciation to the staff, both current, who's in the room today, and the past. And I'd like to name them just for the record: Jamie Ormond, Catherine Stockton, Tim Tutt, Leah Haro, and Jonathan Frost, plus our support staff, Teresa Garber and Mariana Gallo. I wish you all the best in your work on the board and in your lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Board Member Fellman. I'd like to say a few words. I would like all of us and those that are attending this meeting to be aware that Diane has extensive experience in regulatory and legislative expertise in energy operations. through the CPUC, the California Energy Commission, and other corporate energy organizations. And, you know, she helped form who we are today by being our vice chair for the first few years. We had our second board meeting as we were just getting our feet wet just days before the nation locked down for COVID, and we had to create our identity virtually. And she helped, as she said, create our committees and give us some structure and direction and how we could provide the best and most constructive feedback to the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety as we then moved from CPUC to CNRA. And all of this, I've just been so grateful for your direction and your expertise and your insight. Everything that you've been able to help us establish is really paving the way for other states in the United States to follow our lead on facing similar issues of aging infrastructure and changing climate. And I've learned a lot by watching you lead and bringing us to where we are today. And you're going to stay part of the Wasabi family and hope that you proceed to give us insight in your free time. I'll certainly be reaching out for your expertise. So we'll miss you. We'll have a literal and figurative hole while you're gone when you leave tomorrow. And we'll miss you. And thank you for everything you've been able to do for us.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Porter.
Yeah, I have been part of in one iteration or another of the executive committee from the beginning. And I want to say our first chair and you, Diane, set a foundation for us to build on, to follow, to want us to keep true to. And me, most of all, enjoyed your mentorship and your guidance, reining me back in when when I would get overly animated. We're going to miss you. You brought perspective to this process that we never would have had and understood. Your regulatory experience and your gumption, period, is something that we're going to miss. And you're just a wonderful, wonderful person, by the way. So I'm going to miss you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Board Member Mader has arrived.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad I was able to get here in time to be able to say some words. You know, when I first was named to this board, I remember having lunch with Diane, Catherine, and Jamie across the street from the CPUC. And I think I said, I know what to do. We need to do these things, right? And Board Member Feldman, you kind of like sighed and rolled your eyes a little bit. Like there's a way that these things are done. And I have to tell you that, you know, you have taught me so much. You have made me more effective as a board member and able to achieve the mission as set forth for the California people. You leave a lasting legacy, both here and elsewhere. I want to echo Board Member Porter's the mentorship and guidance that you provided. I think one time before I had as much guidance, and I think I remember the chair saying, "Oh, there goes Mader again, making friends," when I really wasn't making friends. And you have actually helped me to understand how those intergovernmental relationships work so that we could be more effective. And again, echoing Board Member Porter, you're just a wonderful person. It's been an honor to serve with you, and I look forward to consulting you or just talking sometimes and catching up. So thank you for everything. And also thank you that I was able to avoid being on the executive committee because I knew it was in good hands and I didn't have to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And, you know, you will always be my troublemaker.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So, I mean, I just don't know what else to say than what everybody else has already said. Diane, you've been so instrumental in all this stuff. I, like I said, echo what everybody else said, and really enjoyed your friendship, your mentorship, and I was truly shocked when I saw the email. I was hoping that something would change between then and now, but obviously not. So, gonna miss you. Thank you for everything.
Oh, you're welcome, Ralph, and we'll have to take the Wranglers out.
I too, Diane, just want to thank you for everything that you've done. And I echo everybody else in that I'm really going to miss you. And I hope that we do still see you, because you've been wonderful to get to know and you've done so much for this board. It wouldn't be the same without you. And it won't be the same without you going forward.
Thanks, Alex.
Diane, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the general guidance that you provided as I was easing my way into the board. And so I just so appreciate that and echo the words of the other people here as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tim. And again, thank you so much. I think you know where to find me. And I guess this is farewell and not goodbye.
Good. Well, Diane, you'll probably hear from me tomorrow. So I hope you won't be too far away. Thank you all, everybody, for your comments. Thank you, Diane, again, for all that you've done for us and for leading and being such a tremendous example for us and setting us off on a really strong path. Thank you. I would like to ask if there are any other opening statements from board members. Okay, hearing none, we'll hear from an update on the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety Policy Division. For this item, we'll hear from Nicole Dunlop. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Block and board members. Can you hear and see me okay? All right. My name is Nicole Dunlap. I'm a program and project supervisor in Energy Safety's Electrical Safety Policy Division, and today I'll provide an update about what the policy division has achieved since your last meeting and provide an overview of what we'll be working on in the coming months. I'll go over wildfire mitigation plans, or WMPs, safety culture assessments, executive compensation, safety certifications, and our risk model working group. So for wildfire mitigation plans, Policy Division has been evaluating the Electrical Corporation's 2025 WMP updates. We've staggered their submission schedules into two groups. Group 1 includes Pacific Gas and Electric Company, PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, SDG&E, Southern California Edison, and Bear Valley Electric Service. Group 1 submitted their 2025 WMP updates on April 2nd, 2024. Group 2 includes PacifiCorp, Liberty Utilities, Transbay Cable, Horizon West Transmission, and LS Power Grid California. Group 2 submitted their 2025 WMP updates on July 8th, 2024. Not all electrical corporations' 2025 WMP updates conformed to our WMP update guideline requirements, so we issued requests for errata and/or reject and resubmit orders to them. We requested errata from SDG&E, PG&E, and Bear Valley, and we issued a reject and resubmit order to Bear Valley and Liberty Utilities. We published all of our draft decisions for Group 1 electrical corporations in August last month. Group 2 decisions are forthcoming. We've also been revising the WMP base guidelines suite of documents for the 2026 to 2028 base WMP cycle. We plan to publish the draft WMP base guidelines suite of documents in September, and we'll host a public workshop before finalizing. We will send the draft guidelines out for input from the board, from sister agencies, and from the public. As a reminder, information and announcements about energy safety's WMP guidelines and decisions can all be accessed through our docket. Regarding safety culture branch and work streams, the policy division is in the process of standing up a new safety culture branch. We recently hired a supervisor and are currently recruiting staff. This group will carry out our safety culture assessments, executive compensation structure reviews, and the review and issuance of safety certifications. The 2024 safety culture assessments are delayed until a contractor is on board. Once a contractor is on board, we will publish the draft safety culture assessment guidelines, receive stakeholder comments, adopt the final guidelines, and then begin the safety culture assessments. We don't expect to have the 2024 safety culture assessment reports issued in time for the 2024 safety certification issuances. However, electrical corporations may use their 2023 safety culture assessments to demonstrate good standing for their 2024 safety certifications. PG&E, SDG&E, SCE, and Bear Valley all submitted their executive compensation structures on April 12th. Our review is underway and we're on track to meet the September deadline. The 2024 safety certification guidelines were adopted on August 8th, and the 2024 safety certification submission schedule was published on August 5th. Electrical corporations will submit their safety certification requests to the policy division on October 8th, after which we'll publish a decision on each request within 90 days. Last, our monthly risk model working group meetings have been temporarily paused until we have a contractor on board to help with this work stream, and we hope to resume the meetings in October. And that concludes my updates, Chair Block.
Thank you, Nicole. Are there any public comments? First, I'll ask for any public comments in the room.
There are no public comments in the room at this time.
How about on the phone or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Great. Are there any comments from board members on Nicole's presentation? Okay. Thank you, Nicole. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
The next item is the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety update on responses to the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board recommendations. For this item, we'll be hearing from Susie Rose from Energy Safety. Susie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to share a slide deck here. Let's hope this goes well. Oh. There we go. Okay. Try that again. There we go. Okay, can everyone see the first slide with the title page?
I think we can see, do we all see Susie's presentation or Rain's? Oh, here we go. Sorry, got it.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for your patience. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Susie Rose, the Program Manager for the Electrical Safety Policy Division, and I'm here to present to the board our evaluation of the WSAB recommendations for WMP guidelines, performance metrics, and the SCA process. We don't have a whole lot of time today, and the board had a lot of great recommendations, so I'm going to try and move through these quickly and hopefully leave us time for questions at the end. The objective here today is to provide an overview of the analysis and recommendations of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, or Energy Safety, regarding the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board, WSAB, or Board recommendations report. And you can see the title of the report as a little footnote. A background on this work stream, Public Utilities Code Section 8389B directs the WSAB to make recommendations to energy safety on an annual basis regarding WMP requirements, performance metrics, and safety culture assessment process. And the WSAB adopted its recommendations report on June 5th, 2024. Public Utilities Code Section 8389C directs energy safety to issue an analysis and recommendation to the CPUC on the recommendations provided by the WSAB. And we published our report to satisfy that, our evaluation report on August 22nd, 2024, and also shared that with the CPUC. And you can see the title of our report in the footnote here. So that's I'm going to be going over the recommendations that were in our report. I'm going to try and move quickly. So if you want more detail, you can look up that report that's published to the docket. So an overview of our recommendations. The WSAB provided 15 recommendations to us regarding wildfire mitigation plans, and we are recommending to incorporate 1 as proposed, incorporate 9 with minor adjustments that we'll go over in the next slides, potentially incorporate 2 in the future that we want to research a little bit more and figure out how we might be able to make best use of them. And 3, we propose to not incorporate. For the performance metrics, the WSAB had 1 recommendation that we are proposing not to incorporate this year. And then for safety culture assessments, 5 recommendations from the board, 4 that we will potentially incorporate in the future, and 1 that we are recommending not incorporating. So starting off with the WMP recommendations. So the first recommendation the board had was that the cost benefit analysis calculations should quantify the benefits of avoided PSPS events, and that we should require the electrical corporations to describe how they calculate the benefits from avoided events and include those benefits as a part of their CBA calculations. So we're proposing to incorporate this with adjustments in our wildfire mitigation strategy section of the draft WMP technical guidelines. We will require the electrical corporations to include a breakout of the amount of the CBA that's influenced by PSPS risk. Thus far, the CPUC has not directed the electrical corporations as to exactly how to include PSPS risk in CBA. So we'll be asking them to, break that out when they show us their cost-benefit analysis. Recommendation 1A, from the board, that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to provide information on areas that have already been hardened and are still subject to PSPS events, and that the data should include relevant metrics on customer outage minutes in those hardened areas. This one also is an incorporate with adjustments. We can actually already perform the spatial analysis of the existing spatial reporting data for each of the electrical corporations to determine an electrical corporation's customer outage minutes due to PSPS events in the hardened areas, but that data is not public. So therefore, we're going to additionally require each electrical corporation to provide a narrative describing the areas that it has hardened, that are still subject to PSPS events, and its plans to mitigate the PSPS events in those hardened areas. Recommendation from the board 1B, energy safety should require the electrical corporations to collect data and report on how effective the grid hardening work is. Their grid hardening work is in terms of estimated outage and PSPS event reduction. Another incorporate with adjustments. We will, in our draft WMP technical guidelines, require that the electrical corporations report on how effective each grid hardening initiative is in terms of estimated PSPS risk reduction. For the data collection portion of this, we, the policy division, are going to work with our data analytics division at Energy Safety to plan and collaborate in order to determine what data requirements would be necessary to allow us to do that analysis of the effectiveness for grid hardening initiatives. The board Recommendation 2 for the WMP recommendations is that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to report in their WMPs their evaluation of the risk of legacy pre-GO 95 equipment in their service territories in the HFTD, including the methods that they used and the assumptions that they made in that evaluation and their plans to mitigate those risks. So this we also recommend incorporating with adjustments that we would incorporate this by requiring, we will incorporate this by requiring each electrical corporation to provide information on how it evaluates the risk of legacy pre-GO 95 equipment in the HFTD, including any maintenance and or replacement plans for this equipment and any additional inspection practices for this equipment. Board recommendation number 3 was that energy safety should issue guidance to the electrical corporations to prioritize undergrounding of circuits originating from transmission substations for areas where undergrounding is deemed to be the best suited hardening measure, that we should require the electrical corporations to include information in the WMPs regarding how individual undergrounding projects reduce both wildfire and PSPS risks. And if the specific undergrounding segments are still at risk of PSPS events, then that should be clearly stated and explained how they intend to eliminate the PSPS risk within the next 5 to 10 years. We also recommend incorporating adjustments for this one. We don't look at individual undergrounding plans as part of our WMP analysis. However, what we will do is require the electrical corporations to describe their strategy for mitigating undergrounded segments that are still at risk of PSPS events due to upstream mitigation efforts. Board recommendation number 4 was that the asset and vegetation management inspection was regarding asset and vegetation management inspection and maintenance, that in addition to the annual targets, that we should require the electrical corporations to include the total number of assets and the total circuit miles that need to be inspected system-wide, and also provide the cadence of the inspections over the 3-year reporting cycle. So the cadence and the total number of assets and total circuit miles can actually already be calculated from data submitted to energy safety by the electrical corporations. However, to make it clear what percentage of their system is covered each year by those inspections, we are going to require that they report it as a percentage in their WMP, reporting the percentage of their system that the inspections cover for asset and veg management for each year of the 3-year cycle. Board recommendation number 5 was that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to provide detailed plans that remedy issues of improperly rated equipment, accounting for both current and fault duty. And this is one that we propose to potentially incorporate in the future. We don't want to incorporate at this time because it would be very prescriptive and outside the typical scope of WMP evaluations. But we would like to further research the concept and determine if this recommendation or something similar could be beneficial to incorporate into future iterations of the guidelines. The board recommendation number 6 was for energy safety to require the electrical corporations to include an evaluation of the risk from remaining non-exempt equipment from PRC section 4292 in the HFTD in their WMPs. And we are planning to incorporate this, that will incorporate into the grid design section of our draft WMP technical guidelines. And just a note, when I'm saying draft, we already have WMP technical guidelines. The draft is our draft revision to the WMP technical guidelines that you just heard from Nicole that we'll be issuing soon and accepting comment on from both the board and the public. And that applies to all the places that I say draft WMP technical guidelines. The reason they're draft is it's the draft revision of the existing WMP technical guidelines. Board recommendation number 7 was that energy safety should require the SMJUs to include a brief narrative in their WMPs about how wildfire mitigation efforts fit within the broader context of the Electrical Corporation's ERM as a part of its risk-informed framework. And we are recommending to not incorporate this at this time. We don't recommend prescribing different requirements for the SMJUs as opposed to the large IOUs. And then additionally, the ERMs are outside of the purview of our WMP guidelines and is not typically information that we use to evaluate the adequacy of an electrical corporation's WMP. Board recommendation number 8 was that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to clearly articulate a strategy in their WMPs for mitigating PSPS vulnerability and enhancing the resiliency of areas of high societal and economic importance, such as central business districts and downtown areas that don't otherwise have backup generation or aren't required to have backup generation. So for this one, our recommendation is to not incorporate. We did create a cross-utility area for continued improvement to improve on PSPS modeling, which has some specifics about the wildfire and PSPS trade-off, or having the electrical corporations provide additional transparency regarding wildfire and PSPS trade-off, but requiring the electrical corporations to include the economic impacts of PSPS without providing a recommended methodology for calculating the impacts may not provide useful results. Board recommendation number 9 was that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to report their risk analyses by ecological regions in addition to the service territory as a whole, and that once the overall territory analysis are made, the existing risk assessment should be refined by ecoregions as well. Our recommendation is at this time is to not incorporate. We don't plan to incorporate into our draft technical guidelines. We're worried that it could reframe the electrical corporation service territory by sectionalizing it into ecological regions as opposed to evaluating location specifics as we currently encourage the electrical corporations to do. We currently require weather and location-specific information in the electrical corporation's risk models and outputs, and those provide greater granularity than ecological regions, than establishing ecological regions would. For board recommendation number 10, the board recommended that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to include risk matrices in their WMPs to depict the relative risks of the issues that they are addressing that relate to the areas of capital upgrades and O&M expenditures, including grid hardening, inspections, and veg work. And for this one, we're recommending to potentially incorporate in the future. We prefer to promote location-specific mitigation implementation, as I mentioned before, and decision-making in order to maintain specificity on addressing location-specific drivers with the mitigations for those drivers tailored to the drivers. However, we do see the merit in pursuing risk safety visual components in the WMPs. And so we plan to research this recommendation regarding the risk matrices further for potential future inclusion of either the risk matrices or the risk, some other risk safety visual component and future iterations of our WMP guidelines. Board recommendation 11 was that energy safety should require electrical corporations to report infrastructure component risks of failure against risk of ignition, and that a risk matrix should be included to illuminate the volume of a particular asset type in the service territory, including expulsion fuses, lightning arresters, conductors, et cetera. For this one, we plan to incorporate with adjustments. We are interested in understanding particular risk ignition components. So our plan to incorporate this is to require the electrical corporations to provide a narrative list in their WMPs describing CPUC ignitions in the HFRA attributed to each component. Excuse me, and also to require the electrical corporations to report their HFRA maps in data submissions to allow us to analyze existing ignitions in the spatial reporting against the electrical corporations HFRA. Those two things I just listed, we already require in reporting for the HFTD. And so the way that we're going to incorporate this recommendation is to expand that to also include the HFRA. And then we'll also, as with the previous recommendations, further research the potential inclusion of the risk matrices in future WMP guidelines iterations. Board recommendation 12 was that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to reorganize the information required in table 6-1 to reduce confusion and better illuminate relationships between the models. And we do plan to incorporate that with adjustments. We're currently working on updating that table in our draft WMP guidelines to include clearer diagrams of how the models are interrelated. And we will take this, the specifics of this recommendation into account when we're making that update. Board recommendation 13 was that energy safety should require the electrical corporations that deployed machine learning risk mitigation of wildfire to report on 4 things: data collection methods, data preparation and cleaning methods, machine learning models, and model evaluation. We agree with the board that the machine learning and artificial intelligence processes deployed by the electrical corporations should be more transparent and at some point included in their WMP reporting. But we are currently developing our in-house capabilities surrounding machine learning and integrating the specific recommendations from the board into the guidelines wouldn't yet be feasible for us to do. However, we will continue to develop our capabilities and pursue research related to this recommendation and potentially incorporate this into future iterations of the guidelines. And for the immediate incorporation, we do plan to incorporate the data and model validation aspects from this recommendation. And I should note that this is a fairly long recommendation of the WSABs that we summarized here into these categories. And so there were a lot of details in the board's recommendation for the data and model validation aspects that we do plan to incorporate into our draft WMP technical guidelines. Okay, that covers the WMP category of the recommendations. So the next category is performance metrics. The board just had one recommendation for performance metrics that energy safety should require the electrical corporations to provide updated metrics for outages and wires down events to indicate the number of these events that occur during the fire seasons in the electrical corporation service territories. Additionally, that we should require the electrical corporations to provide these metrics broken down by ecological regions, and that we should require them to define the ecological region boundaries and fire seasons in a supportive narrative. Our recommendation at this time for this one is do not incorporate the work required to fulfill this recommendation. We don't feel like would result in significant additional benefit to our WMP evaluations. However, we will consider the recommendation in our future efforts to study, develop, and improve upon our existing performance metrics. And then just a note that although it's not an exact match for the categories in the non-spatial reporting, the risk events it's called risk events of interest are reported in the QDR spatial data. And those events include a time and location, which we can use to aggregate the events into any fire season that we choose. We could choose the time frame that we would determined to be a fire season. And we can also, based on location, give consideration to the HFTD as well. And then lastly, the board had a number of recommendations on our safety culture assessment process. And on this, the first recommendation was that we should include a question about management integrity and ethics in our workforce survey. We are going to potentially incorporate that in the future. We currently have 4 integrity and ethics related questions that with rankings. The questions you can see at the footnote at the bottom. That's in the existing SCA workforce survey. But we will keep this specific recommendation in mind during our future revisions to the workforce survey. And just a note on the future revisions to the workforce survey, our workforce survey for 2024 is guided by our 2024 SCA guidelines, which we have not yet published in draft form, but we are close to publishing in draft form. So we would not be able to work these into the 2024 SCA process, but the way that the 389 process works, this is for the future year. So we will consider all of these recommendations for the 2025 SCA workforce survey. The next one was that we should include a question in the workforce survey about employee comfort level in reporting safety concerns or safety misconducts that have not been fully addressed. And similarly to the last one, we'll potentially incorporate it in the future. Again, this one is not currently covered by the workforce survey, and so we will keep it in mind during the revisions for the 2025 workforce survey. Board's third recommendation for SCA was to include a question in the workforce survey about how frequently the Electrical Corporation performs workplace hazard assessments. This one also is not covered by our current survey, and we will also consider that, including that in the 2025 survey. Recommendation number 4, Energy Safety should request that each electrical corporation develop or submit details of behavior-based safety programs that are currently driving its safety culture. And this also we will potentially incorporate in the future. The recommendation is not currently covered by the management self-assessment, and so we will keep that in mind when we are revising the management self-assessment for 2025. Then lastly, the board's recommendation was that Energy Safety should require each electrical corporation to create a required trackable curriculum of safety culture trainings for their management teams, which will include topics such as safety behaviors, regulations, policies, and laws with refresher intervals. And for this one, our recommendation is do not incorporate our safety culture assessments, produce reports, and the reports have findings and recommendations that the electrical corporations may agree to implement, but we do not issue requirements with consequences for non-compliance. So we're going to consider how we might be able to incorporate some sort of tracking of safety culture trainings or existing mandatory trainings into our safety culture assessment process. So I think we made it through all of the board recommendations. So thank you again to the board for providing us such great and detailed recommendations. As you can see, a lot of them have really influenced the direction that we're heading with our WMP technical guidelines, and we're considering a number of them for our future iterations on both our WMP guidelines and for our SCA workforce survey, as well as the management self-assessment. So again, thank you so much for the recommendations, and we look forward to working with you all more into how to incorporate these, both this year in the draft technical guidelines, which you'll soon see a draft of and be able to let us know if you think that we appropriately incorporated the recommendations, or if you have suggestions for how we could better do so. And then, of course, in the future as well. So at this point, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Susie. Are there any public comments in the room? I think it's okay to put them together. Are there public participants in the room?
There is one.
Okay. Is there any public comment in the room?
No, thank you.
Okay. What about on the phone or email?
No public comments at this time.
Okay, great. Any comments from the board members on this item, or on Susie's presentation? Board member Mader.
I just want to say I really appreciate how much the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety worked at looking at our recommendations. I'm very excited about how some of the using PSPS avoidance to drive decisions about where to place mitigation, so that you get the benefit of both mitigation and PSP avoidance. That's something in particular. I know that there's probably a drive in a lot of the implementation to bring down the cost per mile, but if you don't put it in the right place, it really doesn't serve the public to its full. The mitigation doesn't serve the public to its full potential, and so I'm really excited to see how these guidelines can drive the kind of behaviors that really will make the impact in these communities, that where they get multiple PSPS events a year. I remember when the small business, the small business division came and spoke to the board, and just really was seeking relief from the amount of PSPSs in those communities. So I'm very excited and I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Vice Chair Porter.
Yeah, and also just an understanding on recommendation 13 is how far off are we from creating a capability to examine the AI machine learning behind the curtain to validate whether they're accurate or the right information is being input. That's extremely important to us.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for that question. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview of how, our WMP guidelines revisions process, how we anticipate it working, because I think that will play into the answer to your question. So our WMP guidelines are for the base year of, where the utilities provide 3 years of information for a WMP. And then we have WMP update guidelines that apply to just the 2 update years in between. And the base guidelines are very detailed and, require the utilities to provide a whole lot of information. The update guidelines, as you might have seen for this year, are a much reduced and slimmed down amount of information that we receive from the electrical corporations. So, our goal would be to issue this draft, or the imminent draft, and then final version of the WMP guideline suite for the base guidelines this year, within the next few months, and then to revise the base guidelines again, 2.5-ish years from now. And so our goal would be to try and work to incorporate these recommendations into the next iteration of the base guidelines. So that's something that we would be working on, over the course of the next 2.5 to 3 years, to try and implement these and have, a draft version of that out for you all and for public comment, ideally less than 3 years from now.
Thank you.
Let's see. Other board member comments? I saw one hand, or did I? Let's see. Board member Haynes.
Ms. Rose, I really appreciate the time and and specificity with which you provided the feedback to the recommendations that we made. That's helpful for us, and appreciate the time that went into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the time and specificity of your recommendations. So we wanted to make sure to give it the appropriate amount of time and attention. Thank you.
I have a comment and question. I also will echo Board Member Haynes's comment. This is an incredibly useful slide deck, and I hope you'll share it with us, or it should be shared with us for the presentation, for the meeting. Really helpful for the feedback. Could we also review recommendation 9 around the ecoregions? And so it,
Yes.
one thing, so yes, like the location specifics, basically, so it makes sense that it would potentially influence sectionalization in a way that may not be constructive. The intent of this recommendation is to provide a context for location-specific details in wildfire mitigations that are practical. And so I'm just wondering what opportunities we have to provide some version of this recommendation in the review process when the draft guidelines are out, so that there's a constructive way that we can provide those location specifics in a way that's not necessarily quoted as ecoregions. And part of what we got here, this recommendation was also motivated by how Southern California Edison is evaluating their service territory and doing mitigations. And so we see an opportunity here, but can understand how it's hard to put this into regulation. I think we're thinking similarly, but are using different contexts.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I actually think that my answer here will apply, to really everything, which is that, once we issue our draft guideline suite, that the main document that your recommendations would apply to would be the draft WMP technical guidelines, which is, the nuts and bolts of what we require for the utilities to submit in their WMP submissions. And so, for this recommendation, and really for absolutely anything else, we would welcome the feedback of the board to, read over the guidelines and say to us, hey, section 8.6.1, right here is where I think that we could, make this recommendation, apply. And here's some, proposed wording. Or if you don't have exact proposed wording, that you can, kind of tell us, like, this is the direction that we think that we were trying to go, would you be able to incorporate it? So, really not just the specific recommendation, but absolutely anything that the board sees in our guideline suite, and particularly in our technical guidelines. If you feel like there's a way to improve it, then we would love to hear that from you. When we issue the draft guidelines to the public, there'll be a 30-day comment period for the public. I believe it'll be a 20-day opening comments and 10-day reply comments. For the board, you don't have to go through that, formal public comment period. You can just, send your recommendations to Mark, who will provide them to me. And then if we have questions, or, would like a bit of back and forth about, well, how do you envision this, or do you think this would work? Then we can have our team that's working on the guidelines and our SMEs, contact the individual board members with recommendations to talk through how that might be best to enact in the guidelines.
Wonderful, thank you. Board Member Seifert.
Yeah, hi. I actually had a thought about this as well. Just a little bit of a clarification on the importance of ecoregions is that it's not to forsake the granular location-specific detail, but that the location-specific granular detail may vary depending on a larger context, because fire is a multi-scale process, and the landscape surrounding the location is very important as well. So in other words, a certain temperature or relative humidity may mean something very different in one region than it does in a different region, which is why providing a broader scale context in addition to a finer scale context can improve the potential predictive and informative potential for different modeling approaches.
Tracy, thank you for that additional explanation. That does make sense to me.
Board Member Seifert and I will follow up on that in the revision process. Vice Chair Porter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Block. And I'm encouraged, and I hope the rest of the board heard that that with communications with the Office of Energy Safety, our intent in the message or the recommendation can be mitigated because our language is probably getting in the way to that, and finding the correct language to get us to where we want to go is open to us, correct?
That's right. So, that one of the reasons that we've kind of framed this, one of the reasons we framed it as energy safety recommendation because that's how the Public Utility Code spells it out, that we're supposed to give a recommendation to the CPUC. But the other reason is that this is kind of like how we enacted your recommendations in our draft WMP technical guidelines, and there's always opportunity to iterate on that draft, and we look forward to collaborating with you if you have ideas as to how to incorporate some of these things in a way that would, alleviate our concerns.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any more comments from board members? Seeing none. Thank you so much for being here with us again, Susie. And thank you for this presentation. We're looking forward to next steps. And I'll head on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll be sure to share this slide presentation with you. And I believe it will be posted to the docket after the meeting as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Next agenda item is an update from Chief Sean Fairbanks from CAL FIRE's Utility Wildfire Mitigation Program. Chief Fairbanks, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Are you able to bring up our slides? Okay, so I'm going to start off just with an outlook of what's happening right now incident-wise, and then I'm going to pass it on to Chief Stephen Vollmer for a weather outlook. So next slide, please. So currently, we've ran 147,345 calls this year. 5,755 of those calls have been wildfires. We have burned 838,576 acres. Currently, the biggest one we've had this year is the Park Fire, and that took the number 4 spot in one of the biggest fires in California's history. So the last 2 years been pretty quiet fire season-wise, but this year we've jumped right back into where we left off, kind of in the 21, 22. We had the Dixie and all that. So still getting a lot of ignitions right now through these fire seasons. So hopefully we'll get some precipitation and the weather will change for us. Structures damaged so far this year is 1,247. And go to the next slide. So I want to show you our dashboard. So we get information from the Public Utilities Commission and also Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety on utility ignitions. So this kind of is what we follow and create through utility wildfire mitigation. So far this year has been 194 ignitions caused by utilities and 2,503 acres burned from those. Our top 2 causes are equipment failure and vegetation contact. So again, if you ever want to see this information, it will be provided to you. We keep track weekly. We pull those numbers and then put it into the dashboard. Next slide. So these are how many ignitions there were since 2019 for every year. So currently, again, we're at 229 this year. And last year, the fuels were different, higher fuel moisture in that. So you see those lower numbers. And also you see the hardening of the systems from the utility companies, kind of when everything was created, Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety and all that, and the wildfire mitigation plans. So those numbers have been going down, which is good to see. Do you have any questions on any of that? Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'll pass it on to Chief Vollmer.
I'm sorry, I couldn't come off of mute fast enough there. So we got an earlier briefing from CAL FIRE this year that predicted that the later part of this year would be much like years 2020, 2021, the drought conditions, or approximating the drought conditions. And so we're only halfway through. Do you see an upswing in that from 229 from 2024 if that prediction holds true?
Yeah, we're kind of seeing the same trends of the La Nina year, and kind of let Chief Bulmer go into what expectations for weather is for that. And if he doesn't have answer your questions during his presentation, I'll answer that for you.
Thank you.
Stephen, are you on?
Chief Fairbanks, can I ask a quick question? The data that you collect on a weekly basis that you put into that dashboard, is there any way we can have some version of those reports at some acceptable time and space resolution?
Yeah, we can figure something out. And then also, if you have a GIS account, share that dashboard.
Okay, I do. Yes, we'll discuss. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Chief Bulmer, floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon, all. So, the big question is, where are we sitting at right now with the temperature, the humidity, and the winds? So, as you can see on the left, we've got the average departure, the average temperature departure from average for the first day in September, and so we've got a lot of red on the map. We've got just above the area of North Coast, just above San Francisco there. We've got a lot of green, so they're obviously a lot cooler. But a majority of the state is about 4 to 8 degrees warmer across the whole. And then in regards to precipitation, since this time last year or last month, you notice that probably 3/4 of the state is that nice dark red color, indicating very, very little moisture has fallen in the last 30 days. We do have in that upper northeast corner, though, that kind of bluish green purple blob. That was the weather system that came through towards the end of August that went right across the park incident and helped squash the park fire there for us. During that very rare frontal passage that we actually had snow above 8,000 feet on a couple of the alert cameras. I know there was some snow at Mammoth Mountain, as well as just up by Mount Lassen and Mount Shasta. Next slide. And so the percentage of average over the last year there on the left, you can see we've got that really huge purple blob going through the lower half of the state. The lower half of the state received plentiful amounts of rain this spring. And so that's why we've got a lot of those purples and greens and blues way down there in the southern part of the state. We've got still some reds on the eastern part through the eastern Mojave Range and down through Imperial County. But up in the northern part of the state, we still see a lot of oranges and reds, especially there in Central California. And when we look at it in comparison to what we've had on average, again, the northern half of the state over the last 3 months has seen an abundance amount of moisture fall. And again, that's mainly from that one storm that we had go through in the end of August. There were a couple smaller storms that went through in July and the first part of August. But we had that storm towards the end of August that on the park incident, we had over 1 inch of rain recorded in some of the areas on the incident. So that really helped out that park fire. Next slide. And so the La Nina watch, everybody always looks for La Nina, and pretty much nothing's really changed. It's kind of in a neutral pattern right now where they're trying to see what's going to happen. What they have, what the Weather Service has indicated is that we're just in a holding pattern, and we don't expect to see any moisture significant moisture come into the state until the December January timeframe. We won't see a lot of abundant fall moisture until really late in the year, if we see it at all. It might be another massive February year where we had all the big February snow and rainstorms a couple years ago. Next slide. So this is the current drought monitor for the state. And as you can see, that far north region of the state is in that severe drought zone, followed by, is in the moderate drought zone, followed by the abnormally dry areas reaching down towards Sacramento. The eastern half of the southern portion of the state out through the Mojave Desert there obviously is pretty abnormally dry. That's pretty normal for them. But to have the northern part of the state in that D2, D1 categorized area is pretty significant for this time of year, especially with the heavy fuels that are found up there, the large diameter trees and the heavy brush fields through Modoc and Shasta counties there. Next slide. So when we look at the live fuels, we look at the evaporated stress on the fuels, and this slide here shows you exactly how much moisture is still left in the fuels out there. And you can see we've got a lot of red across the entire Central Valley, across the Eastern Sierras, north of Sacramento, and up into the northeast corner of the state. So we've got a lot of extreme drying conditions within the brush in those areas. We can expect to see the brush that is not currently at critical values get there here by the end of the week due to the heat wave that's coming across the state right now. Next slide. And so we talk about the fuel loading, and fuel loading is definitely one of the large considerations that we've had to take into to factor this year. We've got grass crops that normally are in areas where we don't have grass crops. I live out in the high desert area of Southern California, and we have grass, abundant grass growing through the desert areas where I've never seen grass before. Some of the grass crops have come in double or triple the quantity. So the tons per acre, the pounds per acre of grass that we're seeing is tremendous. That's what that picture on the left is. All those dark green areas, that's an overabundance in pounds per acre of grass crop. So every place where you see one of those hexagons there, it's just an overabundance of grass crop. And you can see it pretty much covers the entire central coast all the way up through Chico. So we've got a lot of abundant grass everywhere in the state. And then the picture on the right, that's our standing dead pounds per acre. So this would be all of the brush that's out there, the trees, things like that, that just have no moisture in them at all. Right now, currently, the vegetation goes into a dormant state where it pretty much is dead. It's not growing. It's not sucking up moisture. It's just hibernating, so to speak, but it's losing all of its critical moisture for the year. So that's what we can see out there. And again, through that the Western Sierras there, the areas just north of San Francisco Bay through Santa Cruz, we've got a lot of critical drying there with the standing dead. Next slide. And because we've got all that standing dead along with all that abundant grass, the Geographical Area Command Centers and Predictive Services have issued out a fuel and fire behavior advisory. I've worked with the department for 25 years, and this is the very first time I've ever seen legitimately the entire state covered by one advisory. And so what this advisory does is it allows all the fire personnel, both federal, local, and state, to review these details, review the current situation, and understand that this problem isn't just a Southern California problem or a Northern California problem. This abundant grass crop is found throughout the state. And this was one of the, this problem is one of the major contributors to the fires that we had in July and August for the rapid spread rates, the Park Fire up above Chico, the Shelley Fire up in Wairika, the Boro Fire over by Lake Isabella, and definitely the Coffee Pot Fire, which is still burning just east of Fresno there up in the Sequoias. Next slide. And so what we can expect to see with the live fuels, like I said, the live fuels are starting to dry out. They're at that very dry to critical range right now, where they will completely sustain ignition. Doesn't matter if it's a line down, if it's a vehicle fire on the side of the highway, if it's a roadside start that goes from the grass into the vegetation. But we are seeing that the brush will sustain solid ignition, and it doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to see that that fire activity stay pretty consistent. Currently, there's a fire out in Kalinga called the Bonnie Fire, Booney Fire. And I was looking at it last night before I went to bed at 10 o'clock, and it was still very, very active at 10 o'clock. Looking at it again at 5 o'clock this morning, it was still very, very active. So to have a fire that significantly burns at 10 o'clock at night in the grass and the brush, as well as 5 o'clock in the morning, just poses a lot of control threats and control issues for all the resources involved. Next slide. So what we've got here is these are our 1,000 hour fuel moisture samples, and these are pieces of fuel basically from 3 to 8 inches in diameter. They machine weigh it and dry it, and they come out with the average. What we've got is the current line is the blue line. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have the northeast coast of or the northeast area of California. And you can see right kind of in the on the right side, that blue line shoots up really far up into that nice green area. That was the storm system that moved through Northern California at the end of August, and now we've got it dropping back down. The red line is the historic lows. So the upper two slides are both from Northern California. You can definitely see that rain that moved in and moistened up all the fuels, and then it's dropping back off. Within the next week, that line will be back down into that red zone, where it's making the historic values and going to continue to pose control issues for everybody. The two pictures down on the bottom portion, the one on the left is the eastern mountains. So that would be the eastern side of the Sierras, all the way up into the crest. And then the southern mountains, that would be the Los Angeles, San Diego, Riverside County, Orange County, Santa Barbara County areas. You can see that those lines are a lot closer to that red area. So meaning that it's a lot drier down in Southern California than it has been in Northern California. And again, we're going to expect to see that dryness continue over the next 7 days with this heat wave that's moving in today. Next slide. So for the 4-month outlook, we're going to see significant fire potential continue to be above normal for August through September. And then it's going to slowly return back to normal October and November when large fire activity occurs less. However, you know, one of the things we can't really factor is east wind events, the Santa Ana wind events. We do typically see those in Southern California start up the last week in October and go through November and into December. So we can start to see those in the uptick here pretty soon. We're going to see some significant fire activity potential through Southern California in August. Pretty much, I would say everything from Sacramento south is going to have significant fire potential. Into September, we're going to see the same thing. The Sierra foothills, the Central Coast interior. October through November, things are going to start to slow down, but that's when we hit that Santa Ana season in Southern California. And that's when we can still expect to see significant fire potential down south. Next slide. And so in North region, there's still an alignment of critically dry dead fuels. That's going to continue all the way through September and into October and November. It's finally slowing down towards the end of November. There's going to be a mix of heat and wind and lightning. We're going to expect to see that. We saw some of it in August. We're going to expect to see some more of it in September. And the herbaceous fuel load, that fine grasses that are out there, that overabundant grass crop, we're going to expect to see a lot more fires in that in the lower elevation. That herbaceous fuel is completely cured out. And like I was saying, it only takes one spark from somebody mowing their lawn or weeds and hitting a rock, or a trailer dragging a chain. It only takes one spark to get that fine cured grass to ignite and sustain ignition. In the south, we're kind of in a tilt where the odds are going to be above average for the next 4 months that we could see large fire potential. So last year was a very kind of anomalous year where we didn't really see large fires across the state. However, this year, with everything being so dry right now, with the grass crop being double or triple the amount that it should be, we're going to expect to see that large fire potential in Southern California just skyrocket here in the next 4 months. That's going to continue all the way through December. The large fuels down south are as dry as the large fuels up in Northern California when we with those graphs that we saw. However, they're looking at conditions staying hot and dry. However, there's going to be less likelihood of lightning conditions occurring as we're moving out of that monsoonal phase. Next slide. And so here's the 4 months significant potential, and this just came in late. That's why August is still in there. So you can see that the northern half of the state for August and September is pretty much all red. And as we transfer down to the southern half of the state, we're going to see that Central Valley area, the western side of the Sierras, and the coastal range all the way down to Mexico be above normal for fire activity potential. Next slide. And as we move into October and November, that's kind of the deciding point where Northern California just goes kind of dormant with fire activity. It's a lot cooler up there. They start getting a lot more moisture and things like that faster than they do in Southern California. So we can expect to see, you know, that large fire potential down in Southern California there in the coastal ranges of Santa Barbara, Orange County, LA County, and into San Diego and Ventura. So that's what we're looking at so far for this year. And again, this they're not really tracking any patterns that are going to indicate any red flag, or I'm sorry, any Santa Ana wind events right now. But that is on their horizon. We've already had a few significant wind events that have triggered multiple PSPS outages, both for PG&E and for Southern California Edison already this year. And we can expect to see more of that as we get hotter and drier, and with the increased winds of the Santa Ana season coming in. Next slide. So our outlook for September, October, November, our temperature, the eastern half of California, we're going to expect to see, you know, pretty moderate, you know, moderate temperatures, about seasonal climate ranges. Just maybe a few degrees higher than normal. But we're going to see that precipitation level definitely down below normal for the southern half of the state. Northern half of the state, we're not going to see any changes in precipitation all the way until November and December. Next slide. And so with that, this presentation deck was built by the guys over in the Wildfire Threat Intelligence Integration Center. And I'd like to thank them for the assistance on that, and take the time to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Chief Fulmer. Let's see. Shall we take questions in the room?
None here, thank you.
Okay, any on the phone or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Excellent. All right. Any comments or questions from board members for Chief Fairbanks or Chief Fulmer? Board Member Mader.
Well, I guess I got my questions answered, which is we're in for a bit of a nail biter, huh? It looks like.
Yeah, we can definitely expect this, especially you know, across the state. Right now, the majority of the fires have been in Northern California. We can expect to see that that trend continue in Northern California, as well as creep down into Southern California over the next probably 30 days.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Porter.
Yeah, Chief Fulmer, Fairbanks. The fires have been smaller. However, they're impacting structures more. Is there a reason for that?
You know, there could be multiple reasons. It could just be where the fires happen to start. The other thing could be that you know, we do still have a lot of communities and areas that don't you know, really embrace that defensible space, zone zero home hardening concept where, you know, in order to you know, minimize damage to your structures, you've got to do the clearance around your property and your communities and things like that. So that's always a big push with us, you know, for defensible space, you know, communities to join the Firewise communities, and just in general, just to, you know, it's nice to have trees. The squirrels have to have trees to play on, and the, you know, the grass has to be there to let the animals play in too. But you've got to protect yourself and your neighbors, and it's just doing that simple mitigation early in the springtime to remove that flammable fuel from away from your homes. However, we do still continue to build deeper and deeper into the wildland urban interface, and it just continues to result in problems. But we're working to mitigate those. We're working on doing inspections within those areas, and hopefully we'll see those numbers come down.
And tactically and strategically, do you guys actually respond differently today than you did in 2020, 2019?
I think we do. Honestly, we have more aircraft. Our aircraft we just got the new Black Hawk helicopters within our fleet. Every one of our old Huey helicopters has been rotated out. We've now got the Black Hawk helicopters. We've got more personnel on our equipment, and we've got more equipment to help us respond to these incidents. And the idea is if we can hit it really hard in the first couple of hours, we've got a solid chance on keeping the fires where we want them, where it's 95% of the fires are kept at less than 10 acres. And that's our goal, and to protect the communities and stuff.
And we just put one of our first C-130s out online too, so.
Board Member Haynes.
Chiefs Vollmer and Fairbanks, thank you so much for the presentation and the associated material. Does the work that you do give us any insight into the effectiveness of wildfire mitigation that's taking place by utilities? I know it's a really broad and open question, but do you have any insights into that, either with the information that you're providing here or in other material that you have available to you?
I think what you see since the creation, like I said, of Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety and ourselves since 2019, and you look at our dashboard, the ignitions have gone down. It's kind of hard to put the metrics of the last 2 years to account for that, because like I said, we had a large fuel moisture those last couple of years and ignitions were fairly low. So to go back and kind of compare this year to the last two is hard. But I think we could go back to the 2021 and also 20 and see that our ignition so far are down. And like I said earlier, I hope that's part to the wildfire mitigation plans being implemented and holding these utilities accountable for stuff. And we're in contact with them constantly, working with them. And we also still are going through exempt, non-exempt equipment that's being created. So I think overall you are seeing a downtrend in the ignitions. And I don't know if Chief Bowman, everything to add.
No, I think you hit it on the head. You know, I think the work that we're doing, as well as you know, the folks in energy safety reviewing all the WMPs, I think it's allowing the utility companies to actually maybe take a step back and look and see what their operations are like, and actually begin to implement those operational plans, you know, to reduce the fire activity, to reduce the threat of a line coming down and starting a fire. So I think there's a lot of different players out there that are doing some really solid work in order to, you know, protect, number one, protect the infrastructure of the utility companies, number two, protect the communities, and number three, allow you know, the responding fire agencies to get in there and do some really good solid work with the vegetation management programs that have been done by all the agencies, including the utility companies and the communities.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And I also appreciate the words of caution here as to reading too much into the information right now.
Thank you very much. Are there any more comments or questions from board members? Okay. Thank you very much, Chiefs Fulmer and Fairbanks. We really appreciate your time. This presentation is super informative. I'll be looking back at it very soon. And we'll be following up with you also on my interest in the data that you're collecting.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Okay, and so from here, we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at, let's just make it a clean 2:40. So we'll see you all at 2:40 on the dot. Everyone, please turn off your cameras and mute yourselves, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back, everyone. We'll just take a moment to get all of our board members back on camera.
There it goes.
Excellent. Got everybody? All right. Board Member Seifert, are you there? Great, wonderful, awesome. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Welcome back to the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board meeting. We will be going to the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board committee updates. First, we'll begin with the Policy and Utility Safety Culture Committee, which consists of board members Haynes and Fellman. Tim and Diane, would you have the floor, please?
Is the committee chair Fellman with us right now?
I am.
Okay. Would you like me to?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead and present.
Thank you so much. When I joined the board last year, it was apparent that the board and staff were stretched pretty thin, and it struck me that that was affecting our efficiency. So when the chair informed the board in December that she had intended to initiate a strategic planning process, I was delighted. I was also taken that the chair made it a point to ensure that she selected a date for the strategic planning session that allowed all of the board members to participate. And so as a result of that initiative that the chair had launched, policy committee chair Fellman and staff spent the next several months preparing ourselves for the planning session and the follow-up work that it entailed. I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the policy committee chair Fellman for her leadership during that period, the insights that she was able to provide and the general guidance that she provided to us while we were making the preparations. Energy safety supported us as well, and through arranging for Kirsten Talon to facilitate our session. Kirsten, in my opinion, just did a remarkable job in sifting through the meandering discussion that ensued and produced the strategic plan that's on our website. It's a document that sets high-level priorities for Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. And I just want to say thank you, Kirsten, for your work on that. Mark Wenzel stepped in to that effort at a formative stage when he joined us. And the board had made the request that that he develop the implementation plan. And so this is baptism by fire for Mark. I thought he's new to the organization, and what we're asking him to do is develop an implementation plan. And so this is where I got to know Mark, and I'm delighted that he's part of our team. And it's to his credit that we have the implementation plan that is before us today. What I'm expecting is that Mark and Ms. Talion will lead us and guide us through our discussion today. And so let me just turn it over to Mark, unless there's something That Policy Committee Chair Fellman would like to say before I do.
Oh, and thank you for your kind words, Board Member Haynes. This is important because the board has been in place for years now, and we have done a lot, and we appreciate the relationship that's been forged with energy safety, as Susie Rose delineated the review and acceptance of our recommendations, as well as issued an invitation for further discussion. So there's so much that can be done in this area, and we did need to understand where we needed to go, and also some of the holes that we had with respect to our functioning. And this was a good time to take a beat, review the effectiveness of the board, areas where improvement was desired, and to develop a work plan to help set priorities. So I appreciate your contributions, Board Member Haynes. Mark, you did, what was it, sort of alchemy on this, conjuring something out of maybe turning lead into gold. But and then of course, Kirsten, you wrangled us, and at Jessica's insistence, we were all in person, and I think we couldn't have done it without either one of you. So that's all I have, and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Board Members Haynes and Feldman, for your kind words and for working with us through this whole process. So the work plan and implementation plan document is on the WSAB website with the materials for this meeting. If anybody would like to download it, rather than scan through a bunch of bullets, I'm going to present without additional slides. But I would like to welcome, as you did, Kirsten Taylor, the consulting facilitator who helped develop the strategic plan and who has recently rejoined us to work on the implementation plan. So she's on the call today and will be doing some facilitating. I'll introduce the plan by starting with the strategic plan the board adopted at its last meeting, which included a vision statement, mission statement, and 4 strategic priorities. Each of those priorities has a definition, objectives, implementation strategy, and possible key performance indicators, or KPIs. And the next step in the strategic plan, and this was echoed by direction from the board at the June 5th meeting, was to develop an implementation plan. One of the things that we've learned from Kirsten is the useful division between the regular work of the organization and then under the strategic plan, the things the organization is doing to improve itself. When the strategic plan was developed, the WSAB branch did not have a concrete work plan for that regular work. So we knew what we had to do, including the IOU recommendations and the POU advisory opinion, but we did not have anything written down about who was going to do what by when, including, for example, timing for the board member review and public review while meeting our deadlines. So getting that in place was necessary for a number of reasons, including being able to develop an implementation plan. So although these are usually 2 separate documents because we were developing them at the same time, and in order to show the resources deployed for each, I combined the work plan and implementation plan. So let me walk through that very quickly. The first couple of sections are the executive summary and introduction, and the last section is the conclusion. The 3rd and 4th sections are the work plan, and the 5th and 6th are the implementation plan. I'd like to talk about the work plan and then turn to Kirsten to lead discussion on the implementation plan. The work plan and implementation plan are staff documents, so at this time we're not requesting board action to adopt, but we do particularly invite and request board comment on the prioritization of the work streams in the work plan and how your strategic guidance and vision is reflected in the implementation plan. The work plan is for the next 12 months. It identifies a number of work streams to support the board's mission and meet its mandates. The work streams come from ideas identified by board members and staff. Each work stream includes a problem statement, board lead identified, or sponsor, the approach that we propose to take, products and outcomes for the work stream, and estimated resource requirements. And these work streams include completing the annual POU advisory opinion and starting next year's advisory opinion, writing the annual recommendations to energy safety, and doing deeper dives on risk modeling, effectiveness and cost effectiveness of mitigation strategies, arborist workforce retention and recruitment, how wildfire risk is integrated into utilities' larger risk management frameworks, and site visits. The plan also includes the underlying work, including organizing board meetings, staff development, the day-to-day. Our planned order and rough timing to take these on is in the fourth section. It includes work on all of the work streams I mentioned, save one, which could be reconsidered at a future time. The next step in the planning process would be to develop more detailed project plans and assignments. So I'd like to pause at this point and invite this board discussion on the work plan, in particular prioritization, and then we'll return to the implementation. And so very briefly, that is the POU advisory opinion, writing the annual recommendations to energy safety, and ensuring that those are done by June 30th of next year. Really prioritizing 2 deeper dives, risk modeling, effectiveness and cost effectiveness of mitigation strategies, with longer term work on the arborist workforce retention and improvement, and board meetings and site visits throughout the year. So, happy to turn back to the chair, I think, to facilitate this discussion, and then return to Kirsten for the implementation.
Thank you, Mark. Can you repeat so there's I wish we had a slide on the priorities. Is there one?
Let me pull that up. And so the priorities, you mean the work plan and not the implementation?
Right.
Yes.
As you're bringing that up, I'd see sort of 2 elements of the work plan priorities. We have some of those priorities that all 7 of us will be responsible for, and some that maybe some of our subcommittees will be responsible for. And so I'll just say a few words on the risk modeling component, which was part of the priority list. As Susie Rose mentioned, one, energy safety is ramping up and has hired a number of people for their data team, and they're building a vision and execution plan for their machine learning monitoring and standards as the utilities are going to be reporting to them. We've only just begun to provide those types of advisory opinions to energy safety, and board member Seifert and I have a number of ideas and I think elements to offer in terms of how they're going to grow that capacity. So the risk model working group has been going on for quite some time. They've been handling a means of getting to an industry standard for different phases of the analytics that are reported in the mitigation plans. But there are a fair number of details that have yet to be addressed. The risk model working groups will be back in session according to the reports earlier in our meeting today in October. And meanwhile, I hope that board member Seifert and I will be able to meet with the data team at some regular intervals through the year so that we can prepare our recommendations to best fit the structure in which they're addressing the issues. As a technical person, I find this a pretty high priority because the timing is just right. The regulatory bodies are in need of understanding these types of tools and applications, and members of our board have that expertise to provide. And with that, we can deliver those recommendations for the rest of the board to review, but won't require participation unless there's an interest. Mark, I can hand it back to you. Can you, if you don't have a slide, I can, if you just repeat the priorities, I can.
It's here. You might have to click up above on the top where it says Mark screen.
Oh, thank you. Got it. Okay, there's the POU advisory opinion, the IOU recommendations, the risk modeling, and the effectiveness for grid hardening and vegetation management. And then the arborist workforce recruitment, retention, and site visits. And that's and so going to 4.6 is all of them, right, Mark?
That's right. The 4.7 is the ongoing administration, including preparing for board meetings and all.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Kirsten, would you walk us through these elements?
Well, on this, I think Mark probably would do this part, which is more of the at-work plan. And then when you're ready, I can go over all of the strategic priorities, the KPIs, and the goal stewards. If you're ready for that, I can do that.
So at this point, shall I ask the board members for their comments on these elements?
Yes, that would be great. So, Chair, we hear you on the risk modeling. That's one of our high priorities here. As it's currently listed, we appreciate that endorsement. We'd be happy to hear endorsement or potential revisions of the priorities from any of the other board members.
So are there any board members that would like to comment on any of these elements in the priority list? I will assume that if you have no comments, that this all looks great.
What, Jessica, I'm sorry, Chair Block, what I would say is that I worked closely with Mark in the development of the work streams and the and linking those to the priorities, and just looking at this purely from the POU committee, I'm very satisfied that he's aligned things in a manner that is consistent with our view of the direction that we can and should be headed with the POU community. And so I feel as though he's, reached out, taken our input as this document has been developed and reflects our thoughts in regard to the direction that we should be headed.
Fantastic. Thank you for that comment, Board Member Haynes.
I have a comment,
Yes.
Chair Block.
Go for it.
Can you hear me all right? With respect to the timing on this, in laying it out, there's certain, it is time bound with specific dates. However, the dates are in parallel, and we have, the board has new staff that just came on board today. This is the first time we've really been fully staffed. So I just observed that this is a step forward, and just to be, and I also want to issue just a parting cautionary note to make sure that the things that are important, which is what's happened in the past, some things that are important and not as visible as others just don't get done. So this is an opportunity to ensure that there are assignments across the staff. So there's project leads in addition to working with each committee to actualize the objectives in the strategic plan.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. We've not to date, aside from the statutory documentation, had a detailed work plan to keep us all on track. So that's really helpful. Also appreciate the timelines and your comment on the timelines and the staffing. that even fully staffed, now we're finally fully staffed, although we will now be short one board member for a short time, hopefully. We still have limited time and capacity, as we all have many commitments. So, I understand that this plan is also taking that into account. Otherwise, we'd shoot for the moon and try to cover everything in the next 12 months. So at this phase, can I ask, I would like to just check in, Board Member Haynes, please.
There's one other thing that that strikes me in this document, and I'll work offline with Mark and Kirsten in as well as Board Member Porter on this particular item. But in 3.6 of the document, what we see here is how wildfire risk is integrated into utilities' larger risk management framework. And today's discussion with energy safety and the feedback that they had provided us on comments that we had made previously was very informative to me, because what we heard from her today is that the energy safety does not intend to incorporate this recommendation into their review of wildfire management plans that they're responsible for. And so the feedback that provides to me is that this is not something that we should pursue in a broad scale, applying it to the investor-owned utilities. If it has a place, it's within the POU community or the POU committee. And so as we're reflecting and finalizing this, I will carry that back into my conversations with Mark in order to be able to make sure that we're modifying this and reflecting what it is that we're hearing from energy safety on a related matter that we're including in our implementation plan. So it was very useful discussion to have with energy safety today. We can see a very specific point that we have found in our implementation plan that is affected by it, and we need to respond and I think deal with this in the right way, and that's through the publicly owned utility committee as opposed to something broader that the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board has responsibilities for.
Understood. Thank you. Vice Chair Porter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. At some point, we're going to have to pivot from 3.6. Ultimately, Susie Rose absolutely indicated they can't require nor enforce this. However, we can pivot to the POUs, which are our sole or under our sole purview. And again, in that, we have to be strategic about how we address it. And I know Tim will echo this. We have a pretty collaborative working group that's currently active now, and we'll re-enter as we'll talk about later, actively putting that working group together, understanding how we do this so that this isn't a pain point, but yet addresses the priority for us. So yes.
All right. Thank you. Any further comment from the board members? And this discussion, Kirsten, where are you expecting to dive in to facilitate this conversation? Or
Right now is great, as long as there's no more questions about the work plan for the actual mission critical work and the mandated work. Wonderful. Let me first just start by saying that, strategic planning is a co-creative process. And its success relies upon the ability to have open, honest, curious conversations about what your mission is and what that mission will allow for, ultimately the vision of your organization. And
Kirsten, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But board member Mader has to leave due to a work emergency. I just wanted to acknowledge that to the collective. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Sorry about this.
It's all right. Thanks for being here. We still have a quorum. We can continue.
All right.
Right? Council interrupt if that's not true. If there's anything else.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Kirsten. Please continue.
Yeah. So just to provide some overview, the strategic plan really is about stretching, acknowledging where your limitations are as an organization so you can make sure you're doing the important work before it becomes urgent or an emergency, which I think y'all did in this strategic planning process. But its success also is about transforming these strategic priorities into actionable implementation steps that you can measure measure the success as it relates to the objectives. And so here's where we're making that transition from big picture strategic priorities to specific actionable steps and measurements for success that will guide the board. And the further success of the strategic plan really is about having a clean governance plan that allows for accountability and adaptability, because we know that things will change as we go forward. So this is, I think, a really important transition. And I also wanted to amplify the wisdom of including both that work plan on the mission critical work, your mandated work, with the strategic initiatives. We often do separate it, and there are places that we need to separate it, but by combining this into one work plan, the board and the staff can see all the work that needs to happen, and they can make really conscious decisions about where to invest time and energy to ensure your mandated work gets done and that you're moving forward on the strategic priorities you identified. So my goal today is to, one, make sure that we are agreed upon the strategic priorities as they've been documented in the work plan, to verify the KPIs, make sure that you all agree with the key performance indicators that we've identified, and ultimately to identify some goal stewards who will kind of make sure that we're shepherding the work and then bring it back to the board on a quarterly basis to provide updates. So those are my three goals. To do that, I wanted to share briefly our strategic document, which highlights just the strategic priorities. So just a reminder that we have a definition and the objectives for each of the strategic priorities that were identified, and those are in the draft or in the strategic plan that was approved in June, if I remember correctly. I am gonna work off of a slide presentation that I created. That just makes it really simple. But before I do that, I want you to see this through the work plan, because that document that you had. So the section 5 is the implementation for the strategic plan priorities and key performance indicators. And we start with priority 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But this is where I got the information that I'm going to show you in the slides, just so you know the source documents. And Mark and his team really looked at our plan and the strategic, or the KPIs, the key performance indicators that were identified during our strategic planning process, and modified them into things that they felt were a little bit more actionable. So with that in mind, let me share my slides and we're going to go through each. I have some questions that we will answer by the end of today. So the first question I have is, here are the proposed priorities of the 4 strategic directions that you all identified and have been approved in your strategic plan. Do we agree in the order of priority? One being building collaborative relationships with external partners as the most important kind of first priority. Then secondarily, realizing our mission in collaboration with the Office of Energy Infrastructure and Safety. Third, retaining and developing staff. And fourth, creating the structures and practices for successful implementation. Are we in agreement that these are the order of priorities for our strategic directions?
I would say for efficiency, board members, will you raise your hands if you think that this is still the priority, the order of priority?
So I have one raised hand.
And I have, mine is raised.
All right.
Okay, so we've got 2 who disagree. Oh, no.
Okay, you got it. I got you. I see that.
Board Member Fellman, I think you might disagree with the order of priority here. Could you speak to that?
Yes, just based on my observations and experience, I would say that the number 2 is actually, even though number 1 is more exciting, that number 2 is the most important priority, because this has been something that's never, how do I want to put it? I don't want to say never. This is something that needs to be established, and we're at a flexion point where I think we're able to go in a really good direction. And my view is it should be the board's first priority.
I too was looking at that and thinking that the top 2 match in my mind. And I think external partners help us move towards the successful implementation of our priorities. But I agree, if we're not in close collaboration with OEIS, we are not going to get our message across, which I think we've seen also in some of the accepted and not accepted recommendations that Susie Rose presented on earlier this afternoon. So I support Board Member Fellman's comment on number 2 actually being the first priority.
And if I may, I also want to indicate that the recent legislation, which was introduced at the 11th hour of this legislative session, it did not pass, specifically addressed our relationship with the IOUs and how we sync up with OEIS and looking at the WMPs. And it seemed to me that was something that came up as a surprise to all of us. And it's good to know where that came from, why it came, and again, to align with energy safety on it.
Okay, that all makes sense. Are there any concerns? I think it's important for us to agree, but it also, both of these will be addressed in the first 90-day plan. So we have it covered, but if we were to have actualizing our mission in collaboration with OEIS be top priority, and then building collaborative relationships second, are there any concerns with that? No? Okay.
Okay.
So we can, I think, easily make that shift in the priorities, and both are in the kind of both top priorities and identified in the current work plan. So that should be a pretty easy shift. With that in mind, I will go then to actualizing our mission. And Board Member Porter, did you have a comment, or it's just a raised hand from the vote? Oh, okay. Thank you. So the objectives, as they were identified in the approved strategic plan for actualizing our mission in collaboration with OEIS, are to develop engagement with OEIS, to delegate administrative authority, discover OEIS needs and wants for setting Wild Safety Advisory Board priorities, and sharing Wild Safety Advisory Board priorities and expertise with OES. So those were the established objectives. I'm just sharing with you those. So when I share the recommended key performance indicators, you can keep the objectives in mind. So the KPIs that have been suggested for actualizing our mission in collaboration with Office of Energy Infrastructure and Safety are to, number one, set clear expectations for the members and the board and the staff, as well as energy safety responsibilities. So setting those clear expectations, identifying energy safety requests for other advice and recommendations related to wildfire safety, and participating in emerging collaborations. So that's the one. Holding regular meetings to keep each other informed, and Wild Safety Advisory Board has set annual budget discussions and participates in the budgeting process as appropriate. These are not steps, they are key performance indicators that would let us know that we are working towards this goal of actualizing our mission in collaboration with OEIS. How do you, are there any comments, thoughts, or changes to these recommended KPIs? And just a reminder, these came from our strategic planning process. So these are from this board. All right. I'm going to assume that we're good with that, and we'll come back at the end and make sure you're good with this as well. I'm going to go to the second priority, which is to build collaborative relationships with external partners. The objectives, as identified in the approved strategic plan, are to establish meaningful, mutually beneficial, and consistent practices of communicating with key partners, to develop clear priorities for mission-related collaboration efforts, and to create communication practices and calendar interaction activities to support relationship development and collaboration. And the KPIs that are being recommended, again, this is primarily from our strategic planning process, are to first ensure affected stakeholders are aware of the advisory board's recommendation and advisory opinions through recognized preferred channels, and that comments are openly considered. To that board members, committees, and staff meet with partner organization at least once per quarter, and to perform 2 site visits per year. So my question is, are we good with these KPIs as they stand right now? All right. Beautiful. Those are the 2 most important because those are top priorities, but I will go to the retaining and developing staff objectives. So that's improved employee practices, opportunities for career development for staff members, and to create work practices that support staff members' work and allow for work-life balance. And the KPIs that were identified for that are to set a benchmark for employee satisfaction levels, to define opportunities for staff to engage in topics of interest and to contribute their expertise, that each employee has clear roles and responsibilities, and that each employee has an annual individual development plan developed with the supervisor to improve relevant skills and knowledge. Are we good with these KPIs? Okay. And then the last but not least is to creating the structure for and practices for successful implementation, recognizing that there is always more work than resources. And so the first objective is to establish that you have established and can be applied project management practices. You plan and facilitate open meetings to allow for strategic collaboration. You have a cohesive vision and roles and responsibilities. Ensure current activities are sufficiently resourced and create sufficient cadence of communication between the board and the staff. And the KPIs that were identified to get you moving towards those objectives are to maintain an updated staff guide as a living document, initiate a project management system by December of this year, and that every initiative has clear deadlines, assigned team members, and measurements. And I'll just open up for any questions on that one. Otherwise, I think we're good with the KPIs. Okay. Beautiful.
Agreed.
With those in place, then the next step is to more fully develop the work plan and to identify key resources, which I will work with supporting Mark on that documentation. But the last piece that I need your kind of input on is that we want best practices are to have one goal steward per strategic goal. That goal steward's job is not to do the work necessarily, but to make sure that the work is being done, that we're moving towards the KPIs, and that you're responsible for updating the board on a quarterly basis of where do we stand on these particular goals. I am recommending strongly that Mark Wenzel be the goal steward for the retaining and developing staff goal or strategic priorities, as well as the creating the structures and practices for successful implementation. Those are both internal and they fall within his role and responsibility. So he should be the one to be the goal steward for that. I think it would make sense for a board member to be a goal steward for each of the top 2 priorities. So because Mark will support the implementation and the staff will support the implementation, but it might make sense for the steward to be a board member. So I wanted to see if anyone would like to volunteer to be a goal steward. And Tim, I see you just came off mute.
Could you explain what the expectation is of a goal steward?
Yeah, so a goal steward is responsible for ensuring that there is a 90-day plan for moving towards the identified KPIs, that the resources have been assigned to execute that plan and to measure and be able to report back to the board where we stand on that particular goal. So it might be that you are, and I don't have the some of the actions it's set, but let's just say for building collaborative relationships with external partners, I think one of the KPIs was that we would attend, that a board member or a staff would attend at least one external partner meeting per quarter, if I remember correctly. And so the goal steward would just say, okay, who's going to what meeting and make sure that's happening each quarter and then be able to report back. And in that case, you would probably partner with Mark or a staff member to ensure that the reporting and follow-up was being recorded. Okay.
Go ahead, Kirsten. Sorry, wasn't sure if I should press or you.
Yeah, board member Porter.
Yeah, so I'll volunteer for the goal steward for actualizing our mission to collaborate with OEIS. I ultimately am the lead to report out for the executive committee, which we would mostly have the responsibility of creating that that relationship, making sure that we meet the KPIs, making sure that the obstacles are removed so that the other committees also have the same access that we have.
All right, beautiful. That makes sense then. Let me go ahead and I'll add you to that document.
And of course, I'll work with Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
I support that. Thank you, Vice Chair Porter, but I thought the executive committee should be tracking that, and because they're the most engaged with energy safety, so that makes sense.
All right. And then who does it make sense to be the goal steward for building those collaborative relationships with external partners?
If I may make a suggestion on this one, we might want to divide it into, never mind. I was thinking the POU, there's sort of a POU, IOU science. You know, there's like 3 different dimensions to it, but what you're asking for, Kirsten, is just who's making sure those 3 dimensions are functioning.
Yeah,
I would say it's back to the executive committee, just structurally, because they're the ones who have the regular meeting cadence.
Okay.
It's, you know, a reporting function, and then they can assign out of that, you know, the committees can take responsibility for each leg of that stool.
Beautiful. So I tend to not like to put committee down because that makes it really, I like a name, but I'll do what you think makes the most sense.
I'd be happy to be the goal steward and be reaching out to my fellow board members to make sure that the topics are being covered.
All right, beautiful. And again, you have partnership with, you know, Mark in supporting that as well.
Right.
Okay. Beautiful. So that is, that met my objectives. Now I'm going to open it up for, I'm going to give it back to you to, I think, gather any additional comments. Shall I turn it over to you?
I'm gonna take this time to ask if there are any public comments on this section of our board meeting. Are there any comments in the room?
No, not in the room.
Okay, on the phone or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Okay, board member comments. I'll just say that I think the board is a little bit quiet because we did a great job engaging during the strategic planning session itself in person, and I owe you, Kirsten, thank you for keeping us engaged. I feel like you helped us really make sure that all of our voices were heard and that our concerns were met. And so here we are with, you know, a successful document that we feel good about. So this looks great. Thank you so much. And we're thrilled to have you on to help take us home on the implementation.
I love being able to support the implementation. This is a working document rather than a stale document, and therefore this implementation plan, I think, really is important to ensure the governance on an ongoing basis, and I'm happy to support that. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. I'd also like to ask now for staff, in particular Mark, to work with committees to carry out these activities. And we'll figure out a way to put these into the quarterly board meetings for updates as we come together and come up with the proper timelines for goals to get these annual structures met. And from there, let's go to the committee updates, which I think will be a framework for how we deal with our implementation planning. So we have a POU, or publicly owned utility issues committee. And those members are Vice Chair Porter and Board Member Haynes. I'll hand it to the two of you to give the board an update.
You're okay with me kicking this off, Mark?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Let me just begin by, you know, reading an extract from, excuse me while I order my screen here. I want to read an extract from Public Utility Code section 326.2C, which stipulates that the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board must review and provide comments and advisory opinions to each local publicly owned utility and electric cooperative regarding the content and sufficiency of its wildfire mitigation plan and recommendations on how to mitigate wildfires. That obligation guides the POU community. Today, Vice Chair Porter and I, with the support of staff, will address 3 topics that we're engaged in with the POU community. So, we'll touch on the POU advisory opinion that is to be issued toward the end of this year. We'll update you on the POU work group activities, and we'll also inform you about upcoming site visits that we're putting in place. Before I get into that, I just want to express my gratitude to the board for its support and encouragement of the POU committee's work. I also want to commend Vice Chair Porter's expertise in Wildfire Safety Advisory Board matters, which has been just invaluable to me. We've been fortunate to be able to work with POU representatives who exemplify transparency and proactivity, and the energy safety staff has engaged professionally and constructively. I think what we have accomplished so far is something that the board should be proud of. With regard to the advisory opinion for 2025 wildfire management plans, you may recall that back in December 2023, the board asked the POU community or committee and the POUs to work directly in discussing Wildfire Safety Advisory Board recommendations to improve the wildfire management plans. Our strategy is to build on the collaborative work that has been done between ourselves and the POUs through this past spring. If you remember, we presented to you preliminary recommendations for from the working group to the board in June, and we're working with staff in order to turn those into final recommendations that the board will be given consideration to. You should have received an email from Energy Safety around the end of July. In that, we have asked that you do your final review of the recommendations that the POU committee had put in front of the board in June. We're also asking that you review POU wildfire management plans, and so we're asking for you to both review the POU plans and to make comments on the recommendation document at the same time. We've divvied those the review of the POU work plans up evenly between the board members, and you'll see in the email that you've received the wildfire management plans that we're asking you to lend your expertise to and provide us your comments on. We'll publish the draft advisory opinion for public comment in October, and we plan to bring that final version to the board in December this year. I'm going to move on to the POU working group. We wrapped our work up with the POU representatives earlier in the spring, but we recognized that we had further comments or topics that we were going to continue discussions with them on. And so on October 11th, we'll renew our bi-weekly meetings with the POUs in order to be able to continue those discussions on the new topics that we had identified in the course of our previous discussions. And so we will do as we had done previously, and that is we'll report out to you on the progress that we're making. And with that, we'll again put you in a position to be able to understand and authorize us to proceed with the direction that we're headed with the POU community. So in effect, we're repeating the process that we had instituted earlier in the year with the POU representatives. We've on the third topic that I wanted to discuss with you, we have some site visits that we're discussing with the POU community. Let me see, we've got a couple that are set in Northern California POUs, and so Mark is in a better position to be able to describe some of the specifics that we have with regard to those meetings. We're working through some of the travel approval issues in order to be able to support our site visits. I think that we're receiving positive feedback on that. And then the final thing that I would touch on is that last year, CMUA hosted a conference toward the end of the year, and wherein they discussed a number of challenges that they're experiencing with wildfire management. They discussed successes that they were having, and it was an example of how it is that they socialize issues in order to be able to work through and develop best practices that can be applied toward wildfire management. And they've invited us to participate again. And we're working through what it is that would be the topics that we would be discussing with them. And we'll keep the board members informed as to what those topics are and opportunities to be able to join us during that, during the forum. Those were the several things that I had to cover. Board Member Porter, you probably have some additional ideas that I may have overlooked with the comments that I've got here.
Well, you actually covered most of it. I do want to address the site visit. We are, of course, the state is under a budgetary constraints. And so in that, with these site visits, it's travel, it's lodging that is a concern. The two proposed visits sometime this year would be SMUD has reached out to us and offered two possible dates, the 4th or 7th of October. Trinity, which Mark and Tim and I will have to get together to pin down the exact date of the travel to the site visit. But moreover, the CMUA conference in November, it would be nice if we polled the entire board, Mark or the advisors polled the entire board on who would like to attend this. We've been advised by the board council that we probably need to break it up, and unfortunately with the departure of board member Feldman, we may not be able to have 3 and 3 or may have to do this you know, in two parts. Maybe the first couple hours a number of us sit, and then the second hours the second group can sit into this conference. But I recommend this. Board member Haynes, myself, and board member Block experienced it last year. Again, the POU community is extremely inviting. They have they're all into this collaborative process, these working teams. And for us to all to see this, I think it'd be advantageous. So again, I think we'll get the staff to poll us on who can go, who can, and then it will better inform also the executive committee on how we structure our request for travel to site visits. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you both. I will transition to comments. Any public comments by the room, by email, or by phone?
No.
Okay. Board member comments. Are there any? Going once, going twice. Great. All right, let's go on to the executive committee update from Vice Chair Porter.
Okay, I'll be quick. So just after the last board meeting in June, the executive committee has made a concerted effort to interact with management, supervision, deputy directors, director of Office of Energy Safety and Infrastructure and Safety. And it's been extremely productive. We started out with weekly calls between the executive committee formulating what were the priorities to be addressed with management. That was done during bi-weekly meetings. We addressed a lot of things. Number one, reintegrating ourselves into meetings for communication, transparency, priorities, understanding what the Office of Energy Safety would like to see from us, what we would like to see from them. That then evolved into now we are meeting once every month for about 45 minutes to an hour. That meets and starts to address some of the KPIs in our strategic priority plan, which is priority 2. We've also initiated in those meetings budgetary discussions, setting time for us to set a budget for the next year. We aren't currently a line item issue for OEIS. However, we can sit down with Susie Rose and the deputy director and carve out availability of funds for us to travel, do site visits, to allow staff to also integrate themselves with our external partners. We've also had the time to sit down and meet with our new board counsel, Meg Wilson, who was assigned to the board sometime after our last second quarter meeting. So she's come up to speed. We've set expectations, and she's extremely accessible. We've also, along with Meg and staff, worked on updating our bylaws, which we'll talk about after our updates. And also, we participated in the hiring process. There were a number of candidates to round out our team of senior advisors. Sean Richards was the chosen candidate, and great attitude, very capable of the many candidates that were interviewed, and he is going to be a strong fit for this board. And that's it, Chair Black.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Porter. Are there any public comments in the room, on the phone, or by email? Okay, board member comments? All right. Because it's on the agenda, I will address it. The scientific committee update is just a reiteration of what I spoke to during the work plan, is that the risk model working groups will be resuming in October, and board member Seifert and I will be working towards making sure that energy safety is well informed with how they should be asking for analytic processes in the WMPs, as well as getting to know the growing data team at Energy Safety, and in particular, their interest in machine learning. And that's my update. Are there any public comments in the room, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Okay, board member comments? Great. Considering the time, I'd like to check in with our council and Mark Wenzel. Can we table the bylaws and the meeting minutes to the next quarter update and skip to the staff update by Mark?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, so I'll be doing that. So on to the staff update. Mark, you have the floor.
Very good. Well, thank you. We have a couple of staffing updates, and as board member Porter said, the first is to welcome our new senior advisor, Sean Richards. Sean, can I ask you to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, board members, colleagues, public members online and in the room. My name is Sean Richards, and I'm excited to be joining you on my second day of work. My background and education are in engineering, science, and policy. I've been working for the state for the past 5 years, collaborating with utilities in emergency management through wildfires, ESPF, and other events. I look forward to utilizing my skills and experience to serve this board, as well as meeting with and learning from you all while acting in this role. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. We have a couple of additional staff updates. So one is to note that at the end of June, the term ended for Mariana Aguayo, who was with the branch as a retired annuitant and helped shape a lot of the board's activities. So I'd like to acknowledge her work and thank her. And Amanda Voropaya was a graduate student assistant. Her temporary position also ended since the last board meeting, and she is back in her academic program. So thanks to Amanda for her contributions. So the next update would be to show off our website. I'll do this very quickly. This is what our website used to look like. So the right-hand side, here's just a continuation of the left-hand side. It wasn't the easiest thing to navigate. Next slide, please. So for example, if you clicked on the publications, you get a chronological list of the news items associated with each publication. You really had to know what you were looking for. Next slide, please. And if you went to the members, there was one page with all of the members and then a link to a second page for each individual member. Same is true for meetings. So the meetings page with a list of links to each individual meeting page. Next slide, please. And then we just had some pages that were out of date, like this public comments page, which hadn't been updated since 2022. So next slide, please. So we worked with our communications department with credit to Sandy Cooney, Emily Weinsheimer, and Canby Brown, as well as to Unique on our team, who in particular plumbed the depths of the old web page to map things out. We have a new web page here. Importantly, it doesn't lose any information. It just makes things a lot more compact and usable. So there are now 5 main pages with a consistent navigation bar across the top, so you can get to any of them from any of the others. Home, members, meetings, publications, and contacts. Next slide, please. The meetings are now all on one page with an accordion for each meeting. So if you click on the plus sign, all the details and meetings for that materials for that meeting are available. Next slide, please. The board profiles are now all on one page. We'd be happy to work with you and add photos and get any updates if you'd like to provide them. Next slide, please. And the one that I'm most excited about is the new publications page, which now groups things by type and then chronologically. So the IOU opinion, recommendations, the advisory opinions, the policy papers are all collected together and they're all in one place. So there are ongoing minor updates. If you see something that you would like to improve or have an edit for, please let us know and we can get that taken care of. Happy to take any comments on that. Just in the interest of time, I'll do my final update and then turn it back to the chair for any comments. It's just to say we're planning board members through the end of 2025 and are on the first Wednesday of the last month of each quarter. So the next quarterly board meeting is December 4th. And then as Vice Chair Porter mentioned, there's a possibility of a board meeting associated with a site visit before that. We're working with partners. It's a little too early to say, but we will keep that on the phone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Are there any public comments in the room, on the phone, or by email?
No public comments at this time.
Okay. Board members, are there any comments from Mark's presentation? Pardon me, I need to expand you all. Great. I'd like to just reiterate a couple of things. It looks like we have sort of some new features in our bios on the website, like our expertise as pertains to the board. So it might be worthwhile for all of us to make sure to review that. And just to confirm that you have on your calendars our board meeting for December 4th. Okay. On to our next agenda item for future meetings. Do any board members have any proposed items of discussion for our future meetings, December 4th and subsequently?
No, but, oh, sorry.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you, Chair Block. I don't have agenda items per se, but I would love to invite some of the IOUs to come present on how they're working to, when they call for a PSPS, the work that they've done to become more precise and to reduce the numbers. I know that there's been tremendous work in these areas, and I'd love to get a presentation from, say, PG&E or Southern California Edison.
That's a great recommendation. Thank you. Other board members, any topics that you want to make sure that we put on the priority list for future board meetings? Okay. We are now at our last agenda item for public comment. We'll finish today's meeting with general public comment, which is the opportunity to discuss matters that were not on today's agenda. Are there any public comments in the room or on the phone or email for additional topics outside of our agenda items? That was a no?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This closes general public comment for this session. Now we head to adjournment. Thank you all for being here and participating in the meeting. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the board if you'd like to share any information or discuss topics of concern. Our email address is wsab@energysafety.ca.gov. And thank you again to Rain Vasquez for maintaining a successful hybrid meeting, virtual and in person, and making this meeting possible. Thank you, Mark, Sang, Unique, and Sean for all of your hard work. Thank you, Meg, for being here as well and keeping us in line. And as we end, I want to thank the members of the public who've attended today and those who have participated in public in the in any of the comment sections. Thank you, and we hope to see you all again on December 4th. The meeting is adjourned, and thank you for your participation.